they quarantined the prisoners that tested positive. And they quarantined them by putting them in the hold, you know, the place that they normally send prisoners that they are punishing for bad behavior. I'm worried because I know that because of the situation that he's in, I understand the prisons are limited in how they can quarantine other prisoners. It's a hard situation. So yeah, I want as much information as I can get from the prison. I want to make sure that they're doing everything within their power to make sure the prisoners that did test positive, they're getting the treatment or whatever they need.
There's no way to escape COVID-19 or the coronavirus in prison. Absolutely no way. If you look at the architectural designs of prisons, first of all, prisons are built with the architect of punishment in mind. So you have the smallest spaces packed with as many bodies as possible. You know, I lived in a building in San Quentin with about 800 people. 800 people shared 12 phones, pay phones. 800 people shared about 20 shower heads that are communal showers built maybe a foot apart.
Now that they have all of the COVID prisoners in the hold, is not a pretty situation from what he described. He described it basically as a living hell. No word from the prison system as to when he might be retested or what the protocol is for reintroducing them into the general population. Because you just can't keep them there indefinitely.
I was sentenced to 25 to life in prison, which meant that I have up to 25 years to do, and then go before a parole board, and maybe or maybe not, they could or could not let me out. Essentially, from that moment on to my incarceration to death. But I was not sentenced to die of COVID.
I just have to wait and pray that, you know, when I do hear from him, he's still doing fine. You know, I don't want to get a call or a letter letting me know that, you know, something happened and he's taking a turn for the worse or something else happened. That's my worst fear, is the not knowing and not being able to readily get the information on how they're doing or what the next step is.
And Jake Ward joins me now from San Quentin Prison. Jake, let's talk about that solitary confinement situation. How frequently are inmates put in the hole, as they call it, when they test positive?
Well, Allison, it's not clear exactly the numbers or exactly what the procedure is that leads these prisoners to be placed into this kind of situation, but it certainly doesn't seem to have anything to do with their behavior or anything else that was going on. It is just the fact that they are coronavirus positive that puts them there. You know, something that has really driven the families so crazy, like Lisa Noel, who you heard from there, is just not knowing how long will they be there. What are the conditions there? What's going on? Lisa, in fact, described to us when we asked, you know, do you think he's able to socially distance while he's down there? She said, you know, one indication is that I can barely hear him when we speak by phone, and that's because of all the shouting in the background. So you can just imagine how packed that place must be. So an incredibly alarming situation for the people imprisoned inside and, of course, for the families.
Yeah, heartbreaking for everybody involved. Jake, I know you spoke to an inmate who says that the prison's layout is part of the problem here. Why is that, and what is the prison doing about that?
You know, this is a facility, it's you know, California's longest running, oldest facility. It housed, up to about a month ago, a little more than 4,000 inmates in the building behind me. Since that time, they have reduced that number by about 725. But there's still an incredible number of people in here, and there's just limited facilities. So the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation says that they have made several changes. In fact, let me read you a statement that they gave us. They say, since the coronavirus pandemic hit our community, the department has worked tirelessly to implement measures to protect staff, the incarcerated population, and the community at large. And then they go on to say that some of the steps that they are going to take or have taken already. They have reduced the prison population by 725 people since March. They've installed air-conditioned tents with 164 patient capacity on the grounds. They've also converted both a furniture shop and a chapel to a treatment facility, and tens of thousands of pieces of PPE have been sent. They've issued cloth barrier masks, and they've done a one-time deep cleaning this past weekend, although Lisa says that her brother reports that cleaning was nowhere near as comprehensive as he would have liked. And so, many steps being taken, but nothing like what experts have been recommending. I mean, we've talked to experts, and a memo was issued back in June by the UC Berkeley Department of Public Health that basically said you should be reducing the population of San Quentin by about 50%. So far, they've reduced it by only 18%, wow. And this epidemic is out of control.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it is. Jake Ward, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thanks, Allison.
The United Nations, among other groups, says prolonged or indefinite solitary confinement should be banned. Some experts say it's the same as torture. Yet every day across America, tens of thousands of prisoners sit in cells, often without windows, sometimes the size of parking space. Yale Law School studied this and last month published their findings. As of the summer of 2021, nearly 50,000 U.S. prisoners were held in isolation. They spent an average hours of 22 hours a day in solitary, often for more than 2 weeks at a time. A new bill in California hopes to cut down on that time. It's called the California Mandela Act. It puts rules on how long and how often prisons can put people in isolation. It also outlaws it for younger and older prisoners. Joining me now is Kevin McCarthy, an undergraduate student at UC Berkeley, who is an advocate of the California Mandela Act. And he recently wrote an op-ed for the San Francisco Chronicle about his time in solitary confinement. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Harry. Thank you for having me.
How long were you in prison altogether?
Total of 22 years, from the time I was 16 years old till 39.
And of that time, 22 years, how much did you spend in solitary?
Roughly 12 years. 2 years as a minor. That's correct. 2 years as a minor and almost 10 years as an adult.
Why did they tell you they put you in solitary?
I had an interpersonal friendship with somebody who was deemed a prison gang affiliate. California has an administrative regulation. Anybody who's deemed a prison gang affiliate is placed in solitary confinement. We have people who've been in solitary confinement for decades over mere affiliation with other people for political ideas or being a perceived threat to prison officials.
Gotcha. What was it like?
It was, gosh, yeah, it's, I grapple to find the words to explain it. I mean, it was, every day, it was a battle. I remember losing a sense of what human touch felt like. As the years went on, I began to lose, contact with, with my family and loved ones. Little by little, I just, felt like my contact with the world was dwindling. It's torture.
Inhumane is a word that's used often. Studies have shown it makes people physically sick, psychologically destabilizing. It makes it very difficult for people in solitary to go back in the general prison population. In the time that you were in isolation, do you think for whatever reason they put you there that it worked, that there was some benefit to the other population or to you as a person?
Not at all. I'm still dealing with the adverse effects of solitary confinement to this day. I saw many people attempt suicide just because they couldn't take it any longer. It just makes people worse, and it's a public safety issue. It's a humanitarian issue, and it's also a racial justice issue. I saw that it disproportionately affected people of color. California has the chance to join the more progressive states and pass this law and conform with UN's suggestion on solitary confinement, which says any longer than 15 days is torture.
No small wonder as we watch you now that you are a student at UC Berkeley. What does it mean to you to be where you are now with that smile on your face?
I'm one of the lucky ones. This doesn't mean that excessive prison sentences work. This doesn't mean that solitary confinement works. Thankfully, the admissions department at UC Berkeley, took a chance on me, and it's worked out. But I feel so guilty for those men and women who who aren't so lucky, who still suffer from those torturous effects of solitary confinement and don't have this chance.
Right. Kevin, thank you very much for taking the time to be with us. Good luck to you.
How is it that 17 inmates have already died this year at one jail facility in a major American city? I mean, these are all people who are supposed to be monitored and under supervision. Maybe 1 or 2 or maybe even 5. 17? With still 2 months to go in the year? It's happened at New York's Rikers Island jail complex, and now a judge is threatening to take the entire facility out of the city's hands altogether. The complex is on an island in New York's East River. It consists of 8 jails and prisons that hold a total of 5,500 people. And 17 inmates have died so far this year, including 6 by apparent suicide. And this isn't just an issue for the inmates, but also for the crime victims who want to see justice served. The latest person to die in custody is 28-year-old Erik Ortiz, who was found on Saturday with a sheet around his neck and apparent suicide. Now, based on staffing issues, some inmates have also reportedly been forced to go without food or medical care. There were also reports earlier this year of gang leaders forcing inmates to fight, while corrections officers allegedly did nothing to stop it. One of the participants, who apparently was forced to fight, was released by a judge, saying the Department of Corrections failed to protect him. The inmate was awaiting trial on robbery charges and is now back on the street. And remember, many of the people there are awaiting trial and have not even been convicted. The former New York City Department of Corrections commissioner says other violent crime is also at ridiculous levels.
Stabbings and slashings are up by more than a third versus last year, and last year was terrible.
Next month, the judge will decide if the city should be found in contempt, in which case the court would appoint a receiver to run the complex. I don't quite get how things can be quite this bad at an American facility for so long. Joining me now, Graham Raymond, a reporter for the New York Daily News, and Ruvain Blau, a reporter for The City. They are the authors of Rikers, an Oral History, which is due out in January. Thank you both for coming on. Appreciate it. Graham, just give us an overview. How can this possibly be happening?
There's a whole series of things that have happened. The big one is after the pandemic, there was a huge dysfunction with staffing, and that led to a whole series of unsupervised areas in the jails and chaos and a collapse in services. And so a lot of the things, the sort of safety net that runs the jails and keeps the detainees protected and supervised collapsed, and it opened up a whole series of things to happen after that.
And Ruvain, we were talking a moment ago about, and I mentioned this in the introduction, how some judges are now becoming so understanding of the challenges that they're actually releasing people who are saying, Rikers is that bad, and I've already served my time there, even though they haven't served their time.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly exceptional for like a judge to come out and say, hey, it's so terrible, like the conditions are so inhumane, we're gonna let you out. And it's happened in 2 cases, including one where the detainee said, hey, look, it's so bad that I'm actually like being pitted up against other inmates as like a kind of a fight club situation. And they proved it, they had videos of these incidents. But I think it's important also to remember that this has been going on for years and years and years, and there's just been a lot of new focused attention on just the terribleness of like the entire sort of system that that runs there.
But how are all these people dying? I mean, yes, a number of them were suicide, but what about the rest of them?
Well, there were 10 overdoses, And
So all these drugs are coming in as well.
And it's fentanyl and heroin. And
how is all that getting in there?
It's there's the department says it's coming in through the mail, or blames visitors, but the visits are down, and so it just continues to come in. It's like a river of contraband that's coming in, and we don't have the explanation yet.
Yeah.
We did a story actually a little while ago about during COVID, they're completely blocked visits from coming in, and at the same time, the number of drugs that were confiscated had gone up, and it was kind of this interesting sort of look in the moment in time, because for years and years, the Department of Correction and other jails throughout the country have said it's not our officers, it's not our staff, it's coming in through the visits in other ways that the inmates are bringing it in, and this really kind of disproved that. Although there is an issue now that they say that through the mail is like a problem, and that the Department of Correction is moving to monitor how they actually get the mail in.
How is it that 17 inmates?
First, we want to start in Clarksville. That's where the city's need for a juvenile detention center is coming to a head. This week, 2 teens arrested for a violent carjacking had to sleep on the floor of the Clarksville Police Department. That has people there worried about repeat offenders, since there is nowhere to hold teenagers accused of violent crimes. WSMV's Michael Warwick talked to the folks there trying to make that new facility happen.
It is a necessity, and we don't have time to wait.
In what Clarksville police say is a missing piece in helping fight crime, there are new efforts in Montgomery County tonight to build a juvenile detention center.
These are our children. They need to be in our custody. We need to have the opportunity to rehabilitate them.
This week, 2 teens arrested in a violent carjacking of an 80-year-old man police say had to sleep on the floor of an interview room. That's because there were no available beds in the counties some hours away where Clarksville police send juvenile offenders. Sometimes one juvenile court worker told me they're just sent home.
They know that the odds are that there may not be a bed for them somewhere, and that they'll just be sent home.
City leaders tell me their dream facility is not just a detention center that mimics a jail, but also a resource center to help keep these kids from being repeat offenders.
We're not talking about building bars and concrete.
Clarksville police tell us in about the last year, 177 juvenile suspects have been arrested in 133 reports of violent crime. Everything from dozens of assaults, vehicle thefts, and robberies. Montgomery County Commissioner Lisa Pritchard says the time is now, hopefully with the state's help, to build a facility that will hold those teens accountable, but also give them hope. Michael Warwick, WSMV4.
News is taking action after a man was found dead at Red Onion State Prison. His mother looking for answers. 8 News reporter Roland Wilson joins us live in the Digital Center with more details on this. Roland.
Yeah, Heather, that mother I spoke to is Vernita Phillips, and she says she's frustrated by the way the Virginia Department of Corrections failed to keep her son, Anwar Phillips, safe. He was found dead in his cell while in solitary confinement, and now she's left with more questions than answers. What she wants to know tonight is how this could happen.
Miles County 911, what's the address to your emergency?
This is Red Onion State Prison. We have an offender who is in full cardiac arrest.
Chilling 911 calls from Red Onion State Prison on January 4th of this year create a timeline for when a convicted murderer, 36-year-old Anwar Phillips, was found in his solitary cell without a pulse.
I'm not sure.
Breathing at all?
No, nothing.
Okay.
He's stiff as a board.
During this 911 call, there is no mention of strangulation, a hand-braided rope, or reason for suspicion, which contradicts what Vernita Phillips said she was told caused her son's death. I spoke with Natasha White with Interfaith Action for Human Rights, who says these claims are hard to believe.
The allegations that, somebody else in another cell possibly killed him are outrageous. It shows you that there needs to be somebody to answer to. Who was manning the cameras?
Vernita was told the facility has surveillance footage showing another prisoner, William Pettigrew, sending a rope from his cell to Phillips. However, she has yet to see it. According to the Virginia Department of Corrections, inmates in restorative housing are supposed to be checked on every 40 minutes. However, Anwar's mother was told he was last seen alive 10 hours before he was found dead.
Anything could have happened in that cell and nobody would have known about it for hours. Obviously, look how long it took them to find find him.
Natasha, who was held in solitary confinement herself, is working with the Phillips family to get answers.
We can't bring Anwar back, but if we get justice for what they did to him and find out the truth, it will prevent other people from suffering the same fate.
Now, William Pettigrew was charged with murder and strangulation and will face a jury trial in January, exactly 1 year after the incident happened. We're following this case and will continue to press the Department of Corrections for answers. For now, live in the Digital Center, Roland Wilson, 8 News.
Critics of solitary confinement say New York State is violating the newly established HALT Act. Now, HALT, which stands for Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Solitary Confinement, took effect in April.
Among other things, it limits the use of segregated confinement in state prisons and counties jails. News 4 Investigates takes a look at the reason advocates and critics of the law are still butting heads. Luke Moretti reports.
They need to follow the law. Why is it so hard?
That's a question directed at the State Department of Corrections and the way it manages solitary confinement in state prisons.
Why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to do what the law says?
Jerome Wright is a co-director of the HALT Solitary Confinement Campaign. He knows a thing or two about the subject, having spent 30 years in state prison for a murder conviction in the late 1970s. His longest stretch in solitary was 2.5 years.
I think that solitary is man's greatest inhumanity to man. When you're treated like an animal, well, how are you supposed to act? When you're treated like an animal, not just being caged, but now isolated and ostracized, two of the worst things you can ever do to a human being.
Wright and other advocates of the HALT Act are accusing state corrections of repeatedly violating elements of the law. Among other things, the HALT Act limits the amount of time a person in state prison or jail can remain in solitary, or what's known as segregated confinement.
The law limits that to 15 consecutive days. Nobody in New York State under the law is allowed to be held in those conditions beyond 15 consecutive days.
Numbers released by state corrections show that more than half of inmates held in solitary confinement spent beyond 15 consecutive days in each of the 3 months data was released. That's more than 200 each month. State Corrections argues that since the HALT law took effect, violence is up and more inmates are serving time in segregated confinement. Residential rehabilitation units, which allow inmates to transition out of solitary, are at near full capacity. And because of that, some inmates stay in solitary longer than the law allows.
The HALT Act is flawed completely from top to bottom.
Michael Powers is the president of the union representing state correctional officers.
The violence inside our correctional settings has gone through the roof, has skyrocketed, and it's evident everywhere.
Powers claims that the number of staff members injured during a violent assault increased by 40% over the first 6 months of HALT, compared to the 6 months just prior to the law taking effect. He shared pictures of injured correctional officers with News 4 Investigates. We want to warn you that the photos are graphic and could be disturbing to some viewers.
And the pictures and the graphics that I could show you of the violence in these facilities, it's ridiculous. Officers assaulted, ripped across the face, and beaten. Female beaten to, she's unrecognizable.
They're saying numbers is going up of violence because of HALT. It was going up before HALT.
In June, a federal judge tossed a lawsuit brought by the Union for Correctional Officers. The union alleged that the HALT law would lead to increased violence in state prisons, calling the change in policies and practices a state-created danger. But the judge dismissed that argument, writing, "The court cannot assume that because the HALT Act was passed, inmates in New York prisons will commit more violent acts."
We read the judge's ruling, and we saw where she was coming from, but she doesn't have a full grasp.
Powers believes the judge would have had a better understanding by walking through facilities and talking to staff.
She's just following the letter of the law. So, with that being said, we have proven Since April 1, when HALT came into effect, we're up 40% on assaults on staff, and even higher percent, 42 maybe, for inmate on inmate assaults.
They're saying that their office is in jeopardy. I bet you, I will put money on, I will put my freedom on. I'll go back to prison right now if they can show me 10 guys right now who just assaulted people and it's because of HALT.
There isn't much that advocates and critics agree on when it comes to HALT. Even the use of the term solitary confinement is a sticking point.
You know, everybody throws the term solitary confinement around. Solitary confinement doesn't exist. Not in North America. Not in this country. This is segregation, and basically what that comes down to is this is no BS here. An inmate in SHU, special housing unit, which advocates call solitary confinement, is get more services in a day than an inmate in general population.
And whatever name you give it, the harm of what I call solitary confinement, what the world calls solitary confinement, is people having social isolation, right? Being locked in a space without meaningful human engagement.
Advocates say they will continue monitoring and pushing for full compliance of the HALT Act, especially the limits on consecutive days in special housing. In the meantime, State Corrections tells News 4 investigates that it's working diligently to create new residential rehabilitation unit capacity to move more individuals from special housing faster and efficiently. Luke Moretti, News 4.